Calling the meeting to order. The meeting time start is 6:32 p.m. Welcome to the January 26, 2026 special meeting of the Library Commission. This is a hybrid meeting with commissioners, city staff, and members of the public participating in person at the Arriaga Family Rec Center in accordance with public health guidelines for in-person meetings and the public participating remotely. We'll start with the roll call. Commissioners present include Lee Abdullah, Kim Crockett, Kara Worton, that's me, Sarah Sispat, Scott Schaefer, Brian Westcott, who's the vice chair, and Daniel Yule. Staff present include Assistant Library and Community Services Director Nick Shegda. I don't see anybody else.
It's possible one or two could wander in.
Yeah.
First the meeting, there you go.
Nick will be helping facilitate the meeting. Nick, could you please take a moment and provide instructions to the commission and members of the public in attendance on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Chair Wharton. For members of the public who are attending this meeting virtually and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on an item you wish to speak on, please use that raised hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. For those who are calling in from a phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. Members of the public attending remotely who wish to speak, please take a moment. Make sure your first and last name are updated on Zoom, where you may provide your name and spelling as you are called to speak. Public comment will be heard in the order received and is limited to 3 minutes in length. Just a side note, this is a special meeting tonight of the Library Commission, so there isn't a separate section for public comment, not for items on the agenda. For members of the public here in person, there are speaker cards available on the table over there. Please complete one and turn it in. Before public comment is called for the item you wish to speak on. There are a large number of public commenters. The time limit may be adjusted by the chair in order to allow everyone a chance to comment. When your turn for public comment has come online, staff will unmute you. With that, I'll return the meeting back to the chair.
Thank you, Nick. Starting under regular business, the Library Commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require Library Commission approval. So our first item, C1, is to approve the minutes from the November 17th, 2025 meeting. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
Any public comment on item C1, approving the minutes from November 17th meeting? There are no attendees online currently, seeing no comment.
Thank you. So I'll open it for discussion. If anybody has any questions or comments on the minutes from the November 17th meeting. Anybody? Would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Westcott. Another commissioner, one second.
Second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. Nick, will you take a roll call?
Sure, the motion on the floor is to approve the meeting minutes from November 17th, 2025. Commissioner Abdullah, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Crockett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Sisbot, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer, how do you vote? Yes. Vice Chair Westcott, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Yule, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Chair Wharton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, C2, is to report out from the ad hoc subcommittee on the Library of the Future. I don't know if we're just handed to Commissioner Westcott, or were you going to make a?
Just really quickly, just kind of frame this up a little bit. This is the further work of the Library of the Future ad hoc subcommittee. As you know, the commission approved a report from the subcommittee that was submitted to the city council in October. At our meeting in November, the ad hoc subcommittee was working on near to midterm goals. The report submitted to the city council was really more sort of long-term goals or longer-term goals.
Just a point of correction, we did submit it to the city council, we submitted it to our liaison on the city council, who was gonna look for the right time for it to get presented to the full council.
Thank you for that very good clarification. That is correct. So I'm trying to see if I can find here's the report. That's the full report to council. I don't know if the ad hoc subcommittee wants me to put anything up on the screen for them or not. So I'm scrolling through my item here.
The
Maybe
memo
that chart.
Yeah, the chart that we
Sure.
put in the packet. And we'll wait to have Commissioner Westcott until I think we wanted to ask for public comment first.
Great. If there's any member of the public who would like to make a comment on item C2, the ad hoc subcommittee's report on the library of the future, please raise your hand. Seeing no comment, okay, one person.
Good. Yeah, I might just comment that the subcommittee is working, as you said, on near-term needs of the library. That was also included in our report. And we've come up with a structure, I think, working with staff, where we reflect things that were going to be submitted in the budget potentially, as well as things that we should maybe get a consultant or a study to look at. And as you can see from the chart, we split them up into physical things like accessible restrooms, carpet, furniture, HVAC. I think HVAC has been on the list for a few years. And the need is only growing because I guess the library now is a designated cooling center. So that crosses over for beyond the needs of just the library. Then they had some miscellaneous other things. Again, furniture, lighting, in depth. And eventually we were also suggesting that maybe we look at how to rearrange the back room, and there's things like office pods and things that could be configured so it has more different uses, in the interim. We do realize, at this point, there's not gonna be a new library for many years. So these are things that should be looked at, and we'll continue to work with staff to promote them with budget or other outside funding.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
I would also add, where it's sort of a working structure to kind of gather the most information on needs. As well as cost, that we can, so we're gonna continue working on this chart is just kind of a building block, and hopefully we can get more context and facts around what is required and how much it might cost, and who we could enlist for help in that regard. And also I wanted to ask about adding the Bellhaven branch to the staff and programs needs, because of course staffs both the branch and the main. So the need of a volunteer coordinator, outreach coordinator, makerspace staff is gonna be, both facilities, both libraries.
Thank you guys so much. I have a question. Is it okay even though I'm not? Okay. So, for because the makerspace staff in the column says main, but that would be, that wouldn't be main, right?
Right, I guess I was just trying to add Bellhaven in that column where it says where Bellhaven are main.
Oh, perfect,
It
yeah.
should probably have a slash and say BHCCs.
For all of
All
the
those,
Right,
programs
now there's
and
no
the staff.
makerspace at the main.
Yeah.
Right,
So
but
that should,
I guess for need for staff, I guess.
And then another follow-up question. I think this is such a great start, and it's wonderful that you're gonna add in some cost information. And I was wondering, what's the process for getting that cost information?
well, that's part of what we started talking about with staff when we met with them last week is. Does this come from Public Works? Does it come from your library? Does it come from? And so this is a work in progress. This is the first draft, and then as more information is gathered from by Nick from the different parts of the city infrastructure or it's complicated to figure out who pays for what and some of this, or whether we'll need to look for donations for some of it. So I think each meeting that we have will be filling in more blanks, and because there's a lot of blanks about who's responsible, what the exact timeline is and what it costs, but at least we're gonna start.
Wonderful.
Right, anybody
Yeah.
else just jumped in.
Yeah, and for like potential sources of funding, because of course the city is always the first source. But then we have the affinity groups and other, you know, grants and other ways of sourcing funds. So,
But some of these things require other city departments to be involved, like the public works has to be involved in some of the things on this list, but. I don't know that anybody else, but the library would need to be involved in furniture, for example, but maybe they would for carpet, but for sure for upgrading the bathrooms, so they're accessible, that's what.
Yep, absolutely.
No, I was just gonna, yeah,
I was just saying.
Perhaps you said and I missed, is this, the proposal to have one full-time staff member doing all three of the volunteer coordination, outreach coordination, like one full-time staff each?
no,
Or
I think it was kind of a ballpark idea of these coming from our meeting room staff, like. What would it take? One more FTE or three more FTE or somewhere in between, or. I think we sort of landed on range, ideally, it would be more than one,
right,
1 to 3.
So that should
But-
probably say 1 to 3,
Right,
because I remember that when the budget was being put together as the Bellhaven Center was being opened, I think the library asked for 3. And city council
yeah,
didn't approve, am I right? They thought. And those
We had asked for 6.
We have for 6 and you got.
But it wasn't all for library, there were recreation staff and some other staff in there, I think we asked for 2 positions for library and got 1, but I'd have to go back and get that staff report.
Anyway, This is something that's, yeah, it is complicated because it's a combined department, and there's some. Movement back and forth, but, yeah.
one more follow-up, one of our comment really, which is that one of the things that we found on our subcommittee, which I'm gonna spoil it a little bit, is that an outreach librarian or someone who focused on that would be a big help to Bellhaven sort of issues, so. The plus one, especially on the outreach piece of it, the other ones are also, I think, very important, but definitely really outreach. Certainly.
no, I was just gonna add, one thing the staff did emphasize, which we put in our original report, is the difference between. A full-time person and, you know, part-time that equal full-time. And, you know, they really do different functions, so. So that's, we'll make sure I mean, the whole focus of this is to bring this to the forefront. You know, probably work with our liaison and obviously staff. To get this in front of the city council, so it's, you know, there's so many things going on that this could easily be forgotten.
Well, thank you. Does anybody have any more comments before I move to the next,
or suggestion.
or suggestions, yeah? These are
I
good.
did some suggestions and we'll update this.
Yeah. I don't think there's any need for any vote or anything, we're just kind of keeping you updated on what we're doing. All right, so the next item is for the new ad hoc subcommittee on District 1 Library Outreach reporting. So. I guess, well, maybe we have the subcommittee introduce the item, well, then we'll take public comment, and then we can have a discussion about it.
Sure, I mean, you don't have to do your whole presentation right now, subcommittee, just I think sort of. Like I did with the previous one, just kind of frame what you're doing and what the sort of charge of your subcommittee is, and then we'll take public comment and then maybe go through a more in-depth discussion.
Sure, I'll start and then the other subcommittee members can jump in with some of this stuff. So we've met twice and been communicating online quite a bit. We are focused on sort of outreach and community engagement in the Bellhaven area and finding out what sorts of things we can do, what sorts of things we have done, and coming up with some concrete suggestions for what to do there. So we also have a couple of questions that we maybe want to discuss with library staff, perhaps tonight or perhaps at a later time if it's too in detail or too complex. One concrete suggestion that we have is we are looking into improving signage for the Bellhaven location because it's quite hidden. Well, unless you happen to know it's there, there's no way you're going to be driving all the way over there and suddenly come across it. So Sarah's been doing some investigation on what it would take to get some signage up that would help that. So yeah, so that's the basis of what we've been working on. Anyone else want to go in? Basis or
We can get a public comment and then we can have a
Right.
more detailed
Yes.
session, would be great.
Great. Any comment on item C3? No comment.
Oh, throughout the hallway. Okay, so, anybody else from the subcommittee want to be back
And
here?
I've got your report here, if you want me to pull it up on the screen or anything, or.
Was it a packet?
It was not in the packet,
Okay.
no, but it will be in the minutes.
So, yeah, let's put it up on the screen then.
Okay.
Should I close it?
That would be my.
I think that I would do so.
After we don't applaud the.
Like a good.
I walked by them coming in just as they were going.
Like a good karate shot as much as the next person. Okay, so I think this is just sort of the narrative.
This is what Daniel just went.
Right, okay, so let's see how about this. Here we go.
And then, yeah, that's the concrete of what Sarah, I think that's the photo you took, right?
Oh, that's
Or
actually.
you took it from maps.
I was trying to figure out, late at night after my children were asleep, so it's very, blurred, but like all these, fun lights, so I got a regular snapshot, so shall we talk about this now, or would you guys like to start? Yeah, sure, so, we would like to just ask, you and members of the public, how folks would feel about adding a library sign to a nearby local road. We feel like that might be one visible way that people who are local to the community could find out about the library. Our newsletter is so well read and well regarded, but folks who aren't on the list, just a visual sign might help. And so we were thinking, okay, if a sign is a good idea, then where's a logical place to put it? We want a high traffic road, but not as high traffic maybe as like 101, where there are lots of people who don't live in the community who are driving there. So we were thinking, okay, well, there is an existing sign, which says, welcome to the Bellhaven neighborhood. And we were thinking, what if we added a little portion below that sign, perhaps, that added something about our library and community center to sort of, because it is, I think, a gem of the community and it might be a logical place, but, as a very first step, we were just hoping to have some discussion about how people would feel about a sign, and if that's not a terrible idea, does anyone have any thoughts about a location like this one?
I think it's a great idea. I don't think people know how to get to that library or where it is exactly. I think there's a vague notion that it's there. But if you on Willow Road have at least one, if not two, signs in both directions, kind of, because you're coming from maybe you're coming from the other side of Menlo Park, or maybe you're coming from the Dunbar Bridge area. I mean, it's definitely two, and then perhaps Newbridge.
What are the logistics for getting a sign put up in Menlo Park like that? Adding to one that's existing or putting in a new one?
I don't know. I do know that there used to be two identifying signs for the Bellhaven Library when it was located on Ivy Drive. And they were on the corner of Ivy and Willow, I think one in each direction on Willow. So this is not like some crazy idea. Since we've done it before. It's not terribly hard to manufacture or terribly expensive to manufacture and mount a sign. I think where I would have to ask some questions of Public Works and Planning is what are the sign regulations? I think if we're talking about a rather simple identifying sign like this, you know, it's not a 50-foot long banner that's rotating or going, though I did think about standing out there with my sign spinner thing. I think that would be a nice stunt to do. I probably would cause an accident. I don't know what to cause an accident. So I can make some inquiries and find out.
That'd be good to know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That'd be a great start.
One thing, if you're gonna have a conversation, when we met, I think what we had out of our couple of meetings are like, here's a list of questions, but like, let's meet with staff and dive in, rather than just be like, here are all these ideas, so this is probably the most concrete one. And for even just the signage, it's like, what is the inventories of signs? I can walk around Burgess and I actually see signs pointing to the library, although it's kind of obvious the park is a natural place for it. But then that calls to the question of, well, how many signs are there for the library? What lessons have been learned for Roma? Have they been applied to, because maybe it has, but we don't have that conversation. If it hasn't, that comparison is actually really nice.
Yeah, I don't think it has. I don't know that they've done, maybe they have, and they just don't tell me about it. Public Works, like they have done some sort of inventory of street signs or city facility signs. That's something I can ask about.
I think even if they were just like, we do have an inventory and there are 5 Alma signs and 1 Belly, and that's indicative of something, right?
Yeah. I will find out and report back.
And just speaking for myself as a member of the other subcommittee, I will say that I think it's not to add to Nick's workload at Rose, but it is super helpful for the subcommittee to meet directly with Nick separately so that you can like brainstorm. He has so much institutional knowledge about things that, you know, and those kinds of questions really only he can answer. And then, you know, and then you could move things even further along. I don't have a copy of what the other list of questions was. Was there a page 2 on this? Open questions.
I think this was more, so that, the question I just raised was more focused on the sign, so the more general questions for outreach, this is our kind of like. So this is the idea of like, we probably should meet and take your advice, right, and we'll narrow down, like sit down with staff and drill down on some of these questions. Again, we've actually got a fair number of ideas on outreach. Both from looking at case studies in other cities, there's even gone to another library commission. But you want to narrow that down rather than just be like, here's a party of ideas, right? So this is really just about, okay, well, let's narrow it down. How would you actually want to measure success, right, in order to throw this out? We've got some ideas, but we'd rather narrow that down with as a group, rather than just from the outside, be like, oh, here, try these ideas, go with this measurement of success if it's already been tried or whatnot. The questions are focused more for a preview, just more of like, what are the goals, right? Let's narrow down, we got 10 ideas, but they target different goals, right?
Right.
Do you want to measure implicitly? Do you want to measure explicitly? We are looking at the questions as a kind of a marketing thing, but it bubbles up into, well, what has been tried? And a lot of the ideas center around partnering with organizations, right? So we don't want to jump there, but rather kind of work inside and out together.
Sounds great.
Just from my quick reading of this, I don't see nothing's making my hair stand up or anything. These all seem really reasonable questions and things that I would like to know the answers to. I think the problem, it's not a problem really, but there isn't a dedicated marketing person in the library or in library and community services. We have people who work on marketing, but it's usually design sort of things, right? That's more like trying to make attractive images and things like that, and just trying to get the word out. We haven't, as an organization, done a great job of closing that loop and saying, well, did it work when we sent these out by paper? Or did it work when we did a Facebook ad? Or did it work when we went door to door? Did it work when we were handing out flyers at the community event? So there are things that we can try and improve on. I think that this would be a good one. Much time that takes. Should never be.
I think that has actually answered already one of our big questions, which is like, what is the approach to outreach and marketing at the library today? And it sounds like it's very ad hoc, like just sort of like as you do a program, let's go out to do this.
Right, I mean, we have internally, we have groups, and the city has a public information officer. And we have a professional design group that is on contract with the city who will help us produce things. They have a strategy, you know, the public engagement officer she asks these questions, like, what's it for, what are you trying to get, what's success look like, what's the deadline, you know, and tries to help us do this so we don't just run up and go, hey, we've got a program tomorrow, you make some flyers. So she's trying to keep us professional and organized. So it's not completely ad hoc, but that's what I've noticed, is that I think if you want to sort of talk to people about what works and what doesn't work, other than just sort of you know, the information that you think, we don't have a lot of proof for what works and what doesn't work. And so I'd like to have a little more information about it so that we can use that to make decisions, like, you know, does it work? Do Facebook ads work? Does does word of mouth the best way? Is it meetup of other platforms that are, it's, you know, which of our social media accounts is getting more people to come to the library? So yes.
So as an action item, I guess we should meet with you and someone else from the library, maybe?
Yeah, I think Rose, the team lead for the library, I think would be great. And then as we have more specific questions about if you have more specific questions about particular programs, we could bring in other people like the children's librarian or the teen librarian, things like that.
I'd ask how, we have, when we get these packets, we have all these lovely statistics about event turnout and all of that. How are those currently measured? Like, how do we get those attendance numbers?
A couple of different ways. For the ones that have a registration component, we can pull those from our registration system. For something like tomorrow's library adventure, where it's basically just a scrum of people, there's somebody standing there with a clicker and counting people at the door. And then we'll enter that into we have some tracking software for things like that, and then we'll pull the reports from that.
So not necessarily a pipeline that would be easy to add into a little, tell us how you learned of this event kind of thing.
No, we've done that from time to time. We've had we'll pop up with a table and a bowl of candy and go, hey, why did you come to this event? Or where did you hear about it? Then you can get a piece of candy. So sorts of things, but not, for instance, on the rec side of the house. Since everybody registers for classes through the registration software, it's very easy to then send out a post-class survey saying, how did you like it? How did you like the facility? How did you hear about it? That's super easy to do. It's more difficult with the library programs. But John Weaver would also be somebody that we might want to talk to, who does all the programming. Who tries to do that himself, because he's trying to figure out what way works best to promote his programs.
Anybody else, any questions or comments? Yeah, thank you, you guys are off to a great start. All right, the next item is C4, update on library commission work plan, item number 5. Staff's going to provide a brief introduction, and we'll take public comment, and then we can have our discussion.
So if you remember way back when, in November, the library commission started to set some milestones for their work plan as a way of like, hey, let's make sure we're actually working on these things and they don't just sort of not get work done and then we have to report out on them after a year. So the items were pretty straightforward and had already been addressed or were being addressed. Work plan 5 was to support and advise library programming development and operations of the Belhaven Community Center, including Belhaven Community History Project, the Makerspace program, and policies that might be impacted by shared spaces at BHCC. So I have a little report out on those, but I'm gonna pause here and ask the chair if we should call for public.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Any comment on item C4? No comment. All right, guess I can go back to my,
Yeah.
go back to my report out. Let me go ahead and just pull this up since I've got it here. Three things that you guys are interested in hearing about. The Bellhaven Community History Project. The backstory on that is, we wrote a grant with the California State Library. California State Library grant funds got canceled by feds. Then we asked the Library Foundation if they would be willing to support this project. They said yes. Then we met with some neighborhood and community stakeholders to talk about the project. And they had some different ideas that they wanted us to pursue. So where we're at now is we need to take that revised proposal back to the Library Foundation and see if they would still be willing to fund it in this new state. And so that's where it is. And I think Rose would like to meet one more time with the stakeholder groups before she brings it to the foundation again. It's not. Is it radically different? It's not a radically different project, but it is different than what the foundation had reviewed, what was presented to the foundation, they had reviewed and approved. So that's where that is.
Is there a timeline for when she is gonna meet with them and then present again to the library foundation?
February is we're hoping. It got kind of lost in cheese month there at the end of the year. She was planning on bringing it back in like November or December, but was having some scheduling problems with some of the folks in the stakeholder groups.
Just to refresh, what is the?
I'm sorry, I should have led with that, right? I should have led with that. So the Bellhaven, the Bellhaven Community or Bellhaven Neighborhood History Project, we staff noticed during the discussions about the naming of the new Bellhaven Community Campus and discussions with library and community center customers, that there was a real desire to see the community reflected in that new building in some way. And we asked them, well, what would that look like? And we thought, you know, there were ideas for murals or other sorts of interpretive artworks, and then there were ideas for plaques, sort of recognizing community figures. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we actually did like a sort of mini Ken Burns history project, but on the Bellhaven neighborhood, where we would go out and we would collect historical photographs and also family photographs. We would ask people to bring those in and share them with us, scan them, get them to tell their story about how they came to the neighborhood and what their family history was, and then also offer as an incentive for all of that, like a free sort of family portrait picture day for the neighborhood. And then kind of bundle all that together and have it both as a web available on the web, but also physically available like an art show. And then a select number of those history things could be displayed in the library or in the building permanently or on a rotating basis. So on the top. Does that make sense?
And that's the current sort of idea of it, or the original proposal?
That was
That's-
the original.
That's the original proposal. I think now what's sort of being discussed now, and I don't wanna say too much about it because it hasn't been finalized yet, but it's sort of having instead of doing the scope of the whole history of the neighborhood of Bellhaven from like, say, it started in like the post-World War II, to now is to break it into a smaller section and go for the earlier part of the history. And I guess that's the easiest way to summarize what
The
the,
earliest part, like post-World War until,
until, I don't know, maybe 1980. I haven't, that's the thing, I'm not exactly sure on where the cutoff date is, so.
Is the Menlo Park Historical Society and it's like.
They are and they will be, yes. But the thing is that when we started to do some research on this, we found that the neighborhood is not super well represented in the Menlo Park Historical
They only kept that.
Association's collection. So that's why we're like, well, how can we get these historic photos and these stories of the neighborhood?
Mhm. Okay,
All right, Makerspace is tooling right along. It's going slower than anybody would have liked. At least from the library point of view. From the sort of rec side of the house, Makerspace is going great. It's being used for senior art classes. The after school kids program uses it all the time, and it's used for like contract classes on like programming and 3D printing and all sorts of different things that contract instructors go and use it there. The library has started to do like drop-in crafting programs on Saturdays to see if that's gonna catch on or not. It's not a regular enough thing now, but you can go there and see there's a schedule on the actual physical makerspace of what's going on. And now that I said that out loud, it might be a really good idea to have that online so that people can take a look and see what's going on there. So that's where we're at. I know the senior team is looking to start up some more sewing classes there. They were looking for another sewing instructor. And I think if we have time to sort of gather our thoughts about it, the library might be interested in sort of programming the space by having presenters or contractors come in as well and offer programs. So since the stumbling block for the library seems to be staff time in running programs. So I'm going to suggest to Rose that we look at kind of folding a little bit of makerspace programming into our general library programming. So maybe we can hire somebody to come in and teach a class on 3D printing or something, have it for free, so it's not a contract class like through the rec side of the house. Yes.
I was just sort of gonna ask, what is the difference between the library offering a program like that and the rec side offering a program like that? Is it just that you don't pay for it if the library does it? Or?
The libraries, for the most part, offers free programs. And the rec side of the house is usually doing a little bit of cost recovery as policy. They charge something, usually not a lot. And the rates are much lower for hyperlocal residents to the Belhaven Library. But that model is usually, it's like a class. It usually takes longer or lasts for a longer period of time. The library tends not to do classes so much. They tend to do like an event or a seminar or sometimes we'll do art shows and things that last for a long time, but those aren't sort of actively programmed, if that makes sense.
Gotcha, so the difference is sort of like A, wouldn't cost anything, B, probably would be like an 8-week class.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I wanna tell a story about going to one of those programs.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, it's a good story.
Yeah, it's a reflective story, and it touches on a conversation that we've had in our son. There's something very different about walking into Alma and walking into Belhaven. And yeah, the Belhaven is like getting used to it, figuring out where like there's a basketball gym here, and then there's like a soccer field behind everything, right? When you walk into Alma, you kind of like, I'm in the library, you know immediately. There's a desk person usually there who sees you lingering, and they're like, can I help you? And it feels very different. Belhaven, for a variety of reasons, it's like this multi-resource center. We went to a 10 making program. It was like instead of paper, it was 10, you do impressions into it to make a piece of art. And the way to go in there is like you go in and you have to look for a chalkboard that says makers things up here, right? If you know to read that chalkboard. Then you go up there and then you go to the adult library, which is different than the children's library. And when we went, there are actually two entrances to the space. But one of them says, do not go in.
That's because it's locked from
Yeah.
that direction.
And so you see that, and you're like, oh, and you're like, we saw a couple people, it's just like, oh, we're late, it's locked because you can't go in here because it's too late. And so some of us just went and were like, well, we're just gonna read in the library, and then when you read in the library, like, oh, there's another door, and people are going in, right? And so it's just interesting in this idea of like the value of signage and et cetera. I wonder if it's even more important in the belly of the library, because it doesn't feel like a library once you walk in. And so the spaces that, and there was so much staff in there working, it was actually a really great program. But it just,
It took a while to find.
it felt difficult, right? And then it felt like we were, almost gonna give up, and just because of like a sign, right? Was kind of indirecting you, so I imagine that building just has challenges because it offers so much. But it was also built in a very particular way, I'm sure there's constraints and whatnot, but it has an impact when you're running programs, which feels the impact in the Alma is a little bit different. And Alma's been around for so long, so they've figured out like where do people go, where do people get lost, right?
I think, yes, well taken. I'm wondering if we can do something that says program today or something in where that door, that second door of the makerspace is a constant problem. Programmatic.
Give it a sign on that door that says.
Other
Programs go in through
Right,
the
exactly,
entrance.
or put a
Something.
chalkboard at
Like-
the top of the stairs or
Yeah.
something, yeah,
Yeah.
to just sort of help people out. That's the kind of thing that we're finding out now,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
and those are really good points.
Sure, the great tragedy of signage is that it seems to always be in need and yet is rarely read.
Yeah.
Especially for a space where like, the Alma location is just a library,
Yes.
as opposed to a library inside of a building that's having to do a lot of other things. I imagine makes the directions a little more complicated.
Yeah, but there are things that we can do, right? How hard is it to get a little A-frame pod up there that says makerspace program today? Ask in the upstairs library or something, yeah, something to help people once they're up there. But that door, I remember having conversations with the building designers. After they showed me that door, I was like, oh, well, wait, now it can't be unlocked. And it's an odd situation, I would think, to exit, like for fire and safety purposes, you would want to be able to get out that way, but apparently the plan is you come out the other way and go to the stairs, which is just kind of weird. And then from a library staff point of view, having that door open all the time means people would just go into the makerspace and nobody would know they were in there. So I think they put a doorbell so that when people open that door, it rings at the front desk of the library. So we're trying different things to sort of figure out how to make that work. And it being a shared space means it has to work not just for the library staff, but it has to work for like the seniors and the rec center staff too. So we'll get it sorted, but maybe it's something the outreach and marketing subcommittee could give us some tips on that bit of information as we taking.
Yeah, I think it's an easy to describe problem, really, it's a user experience, so like, I've got this building, it has constraints, it has, a history of why a door is like this, right? But what do we do about
Right,
it?
how do we make
Signs
it
are not
work?
gonna solve it all, right? There's something more comprehensive of like, what do we want this building to feel like? I think it's a challenging one, but it's worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a question, and I should know the answer to, but I know, so tomorrow's library adventure is at Alma.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's just, library adventure is one of the ways where my family and I have sort of gotten to know the library and like figure, because of the quests, so you learn the location.
You have
So
to point out the question.
exactly, so even though there isn't a makerspace there, you learn the location of what is there, and it's really helpful, and I should know this, but has there been a library adventure? No.
Yes, there has.
Perfect, wow.
And I think what we were planning to do is alternate locations.
Right.
So I think the one before this. There were Star Wars, the cosplayers, the Legion of Doom or whatever, I can't remember. Some Star Wars cosplayers, and there, it was a space themed one, that was it. Campus, so I'm sure Rose was here, I'm gonna ask her what the date was on that, she would know.
I think alternating is a great idea, because it's such a helpful event for, you know, Oregon's here.
Yes. Absolutely, and it was very well attended.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this item?
Actually, one follow-up question on the signage, the outdoor signage versus the wayfinding in the building. The outdoor signage, would it say Bellhaven Library or would it say Bellhaven Community Center? And it's sort of like, you kind of have to say Bellhaven Library.
That's such a great question. So I think if in what we have, they will go with the packet, we had sort of both. You know, Bellhaven Library and Community Center, but it's such a great point because the language is so important. What do you guys have any language preferences there as to what sign in Bellhaven outside the library should say?
I just would want both, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, the building encompasses so much as we've talked about, but it does need to distinctly say separately Bellhaven Library.
Great, that's where we were starting with the library and community center, so we're on the same page. Yeah.
Yeah, library and
Agreed.
community center, right?
Yeah. Okay. Informational items are transmitted to the Library Commission in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. So we'll start with the department statistics and updates, D1. Nate, would you like to ask for any public comments?
Yeah, would anyone like to make a public comment on item D1? Check. No public.
And then, do you have any comments on this?
Just to kind of quickly go over some things that are coming up. The feedback, comments and suggestion box comments and responses, I always find very entertaining. I learn a lot about what's going on by reading those. The Winter Reads program is very successful. Library Adventure is tomorrow. That's always a big program. It's from 3 to 7 here at the Hull Street Library. We have some Black History Month and Black Liberation Month events coming up in a couple of weekends. And then a note that there's going to be some parking challenges. It's been pushed back, but there's some photovoltaic carport construction going on here at the lot that's between gymnastics and City Hall. That lot will be mostly closed for about 6 weeks while they do the construction work, which means a lot of the parking will probably squeeze into the lot between the library and the gym. Or if you feel hale and hearty, if you park down by the baseball fields here along Hull Street, there's actually quite a bit of parking there. Or the sneaky way is to park over by St. Frank Coffee and the train station there, especially on the weekends. You can actually find some parking there and then walk back. The super secret lot is the one by City Hall, or the one by the Gatehouse. But just steel yourself that it's gonna be, especially when there's big events like a basketball game or something going on at the gym, it's gonna be hard to get to the library. That's all I've got. I'm happy to take any questions or hear any comments on the statistics.
Any comments or questions from anyone? All right, we'll move to G2, the tentative agenda calendar.
Right, trying to find it. This is why I need, actually, here we go. It's hard to talk and drive at the same time. Is the lesson here. So screen so you guys can see it. Figure. It. All right. So. We don't have a lot on the tentative agenda calendar. I know from previous meetings, we had talked about a report out on the budget for the library. So I will try to get that ready for February. If that is still desired. I don't know exactly what form it will take. I'm thinking of asking our internal services manager, Ronnie, to ride along with me on that one. Since she knows more about the budget than I do, I'm sure. So that's something that I was sort of had in my mind for February. But maybe that will be an iterative process, like I'll take a crack at it, and then you guys are like, no, that's not exactly what we were interested in, we want to try this. Then we could try something else. We should have a couple of report outs from the two subcommittees. They don't need to be a whole presentation. They could just be a report that you put in info items if you want, depending on what you want to do, or if you want to hear the feedback. But I think we could probably slot both of those in for February. Anything else? Idea.
Are we gonna ever talk about the report, and is there gonna be a work session with the city council?
I have to hear about that from the city council, so
We're waiting
We're
for
waiting.
the transition.
Okay, okay. All right, so that's not perfect.
and then probably I don't know if we should put it on the tentative agenda calendar now, but probably in your March, April timeframe, we'll have a new LCS director, so that will certainly pop up.
And if you do the February budget update, could you look at the needs assessment, see, identify if any of those are good?
I mean, the facility needs assessment.
Well, the things we.
I got you.
Working on, just like HVAC.
I'm assuming we'll have another subcommittee meeting with Nick.
Right.
Yeah.
In another couple weeks, so. I was trying to find, Nick, we have another document that lays out what what required items.
Right, I remember Michael did that, right?
I think I did it.
Oh, that's right.
But yeah.
Mike stole
And I'm trying to, I got a lot of.
the recurring, I think it was a list of sort of recurring items,
things,
there's
right,
kind of a
right.
cadence to the
Right.
commission's year.
Yeah.
I can surface that for you guys.
Yeah, cause I can't remember what I named it, but
Recurring. Can't remember.
but it was a similar format to this, but just a reminder to us all, and that, I should keep it and bring my binder.
And that's easy enough to find.
Yes, and
Swap it in there as an
to
info.
make sure
item,
that,
just
yeah, to
for-
make sure that our template that we're looking at has all the things that we have
Right.
previously discussed that are recurring every year that we don't want to forget.
Right, like for instance, chair and vice chair election is usually
Yes.
April, May.
Yeah,
And then report outs to city council or in September, October.
exactly.
Work plan formation, then you need to put it somewhere.
Yeah, so I think that would be a helpful thing to have in our packets to compare to this or incorporate it in with
Gotcha.
this tentative agenda.
Yep.
Don't know if this is necessarily a February issue, but at some point I would love to hear back about, the ongoing impacts of Baker and Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was sort of a lot of stuff up in the air late last year that implicates expenses and library services and staff time. And I would just be curious how that has been unfolding.
Gradually, it's the short answer. There's a lot of work being done kind of library land wide, public library land wide, since Baker and Taylor was the biggest supplier of materials to public libraries. I think what we've done mostly is shipped over to Ingram, trying to do a couple of different other vendors, but how that all is shaking out, I agree, we can put that in on schedule. I could put it in like March, April, and maybe we'll have a little more, and if we don't, we can push it out.
I found the one, the listed.
What date was it on? Do you remember?
April 21, 2025. I can send it to you.
No, I can get it, thank you.
I think I wrote it on March 25th, 2025. But the date I put at the top under the heading is April 21. And so, again, there weren't any annual and recurring items in January, February, so I think that's partly why, but for March, this is not that big a deal, but that's when the annual attendance report comes out.
Exciting.
And then in April, that's when new members are appointed if needed by the city council to the commission members. Then we start reviewing the departmental budget, we select a new chair and vice chair. We start working on the work plan for the prior report about the prior year. So I mean, there's stuff that I think would be helpful if we just had it all in one place.
Absolutely. So maybe what we'll do is, it just becomes part of the tentative agenda calendar. So it's just like a second page of the tentative agenda calendar. It's just,
Yeah, or even it could be a one page with the bullet, maybe it'll end up being 2 pages, but if you just add in, rather than having to go back and refer and look for it. Cause there's stuff, there's 2 or 3 bullet points for, starting in April, every month through. Except for October, so anyway, I think that'll help us keep our mind on what our overall objectives are for the year. All right, anything else before I move on? Now we're ready for commissioner reports, individual commissioner reports. Would any commissioner like to make a short report out on items of interest to the entire commission? Friends of the library, is there any?
There hasn't been a meeting since the last January, yeah, so they meet quarterly, their friends meet quarterly, so. I believe the next one is in April.
Okay, and I'm the liaison for the Menlo Park Library Foundation. And I don't think there's anything particular to report, they're waiting.
I was gonna say you could report out on the night at the library event,
Well, right,
but maybe I should report that.
so you put it in your report, and it was funded by the Library Foundation, it was very well attended. I had the flu, so I couldn't go at the last minute, so Nick will have to report out, but they had some great pictures that we all passed around and admired that a professional photographer volunteered to take.
Yeah, it was fun. The food was really good. The food was too good.
Why are you pointing?
I don't know why.
But I don't think I ate this particular.
The food was too good, yeah.
It sounds like it'll be tweaked a little bit, but maybe become an annual event. It's a good community event that's adult oriented and.
It seemed to be pretty, the budget was small to put that on.
Yeah, it was a lot of staff time. It's how it got done. It's like 16 staff members working the night up, which is a lot.
Yeah,
So we've talked about what to do about that, whether we should keep it a free library event or whether we should which I think is the preference, but maybe add a component that's a fundraiser for the foundation into that. As a way to kind of offset some of those. Make it
Like a hybrid thing. It's free to everyone, but maybe when you're there, you buy donation raffle tickets or it'd be
Prize drawing.
Prize
Not
drawing.
reserves.
Whatever.
Yeah, prize drawing.
Prize drawing. Yeah.
There's a legal term there.
Yeah. So if you know anybody who would be interested in being on the library foundation board, please let me know. It's an organization, has a lot of longtime members, it's a pretty small group and it'd be great to expand it and get some fresh new ideas and energy, especially if you know anybody who is good at website maintenance and updating or social media, that sort of thing, or needing some tech help. And I think they're just sort of standing by and watching, waiting to help with some of these near and midterm and longer term projects to support the library, make it better. Anybody else? Well, I think we're ready to adjourn. Oh, you're very efficient tonight. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting at, what is it? 7:33. Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.